Quick word of warning for today's episode. It contains multiple spoilers for different TV shows, films, and books. So, listen, rather than list them all out, if you hear us mention something that you don't want spoilers for, maybe just skip to 5 minutes after that point, and we should be all done talking about it.
Welcome to Prose and Cons, a podcast by writers for writers, brought to you by Precipice Fiction. Precipice Fiction would like to acknowledge the people of the Eora and Durag nations as the original custodians and storytellers of the land this podcast was created on.
Welcome to the Prose and Cons podcast, a podcast by emerging writers for emerging writers, because sometimes we feel like prose and sometimes we feel like huge cons. But today we're mostly feeling like prose, so we're going to record this podcast. And today I have the great tag team from Dublin. We have James Healy.
How's it going? I'm James Healy, a writer of science fiction and horror, and I do a bit of freelance editing as well.
And 14,000 kilometers away, I think, Ali Burnham from Sydney.
Hello. We'll go with that. I should know. I'm working on a book where I talk about nautical miles and distance between continents. So you think it would be fresh and I would know. Hi, I'm Ali. I'm a screenwriter. I also write in prose. As I mentioned, my prose, I'm working in historical fiction. I work in fantasy. And in my screenwriting, I'm working on psychological horror at the minute.
Sounds good. I'm your host, Matan, Elul. I'm also a writer. I love to write horror. I write for Precipice Fiction. I've had a few short stories published. And in my day-to-day, I teach English to high schoolers. Today, we've got an episode that is all about failure. But it's not about the failure of the writer for a change. This time, we're going to discuss the failure of the characters.
Which is a success of the writer.
Yeah. Before we jump into failure and why we love it, guys, have you been reading or watching anything you want to recommend now that you've got the spotlight?
Well, I'll jump in with Fallout. I'm surprised our podcast hasn't circled into Fallout yet, because I imagine we're all probably watching it. Finished the season just the other day and really loved it. I can't speak too deeply on it because I haven't really played the games. I've been adjacent to the games. And I had this running commentary next to me as the two people I watched it with have played the game. So I feel rather informed on, that's, true to the game, but that's not. Anyway, I had the running commentary the whole way through. So I was kept up to speed. Look, I thought it was really smart plotting, really smart characters, a smart adaptation, and a really intelligent use of budget because they very much honored the costumes and the sets, and all of that was quite spectacular, which, it could have looked cheap, it could have looked nasty, but it didn't. The scripting could have been cheap and nasty, but it wasn't. I was pleasantly surprised by the quality of it and would recommend Fallout.
Yeah, I've avoided it because I was like, that could be a disaster.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, it isn't. It's great. It's really fantastic. The lead is terrific. The leads are really good. All three of them.
Yeah.
James, what about you?
I'm just at the tail end of a novella called Of Ants and Dinosaurs by Cixin Liu. I'm probably butchering that name. He's a Chinese author. He's the author of The True Body Problem. So this is this is a fun little novella, I guess, that he's written about set in like I guess it's like alternate history. It's like prehistoric, like when the dinosaurs were still alive, and it's about an alliance between the dinosaurs and the ants and how they were working together and how they both had two super civilizations.
You got me. I'm in. Where do I pay?
Yeah, it's good. It's cute. It's about the various religious and ideological frictions between them and the various conflicts that they get into. So, but a fun little read. He does that kind of stuff quite well. So I'm enjoying that.
I think that's a top 25 all-time recommendation.
Yeah,
Just
great pitch. Yeah.
Just because nobody's heard of it. Sorry, I apologize. I retract that comment. Just because I didn't hear about it at all. So that's a good recommendation.
Yeah, I just finished his True Body Problem series, and Audible was like, you might also like this. And I was like, yes, more. This would be good.
Cool. I'm still reading Dracula. It's ups and
Nice.
downs for me. I do like it, but I'm going to be a bit mean and say that I think much of the the fame of the character should be attributed to later adaptations. The concept is
Ah.
fantastic, but the execution in the book itself, sometimes really good, sometimes it doesn't age quite as well. At the time, Dracula was not very popular, the novel, only after later adaptations jumped in. I do think there's a lot of talent in the creation of the myth. The prose itself, upsy and downsy for me. Some bits are really good. I did, however, I watched Fallout. I love it. I watched the Three Body Problem. I loved it. Yeah, I'm loving everything recently. I watched a movie called
Except
The
Dracula.
Black Phone. Yeah, has anyone watched it?
No.
Horror movie, The Black Phone.
Oh, I've heard of it. Yeah.
It just jumped on my Netflix. I I really liked it. It doesn't innovate in any significant way, but
Okay.
sometimes horror movies can be so miss or hit. So you like when someone just hits, just does what a horror movie is supposed to do. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, that was a pleasant surprise.
But
Lean
it,
into what works sometimes. Yeah. That's good.
I felt like a cleverly worded insult, being like, it doesn't innovate in any
It doesn't
particular way.
suck.
Yeah. It's like
No,
when
it's
someone
good.
says,
It's
like,
good.
oh, yeah, it knows
it's
what
good.
it is.
Yeah.
The lead is like 13, 14, and he carries the movie very well. Like
Ah,
he's,
cool.
I mean, the screen is pretty much 80% just him alone, and I think he does a great job. All right. Failure. Let's talk about failure. Before we talk about failure, I want to talk about tension. I think we all agree that tension is a very foundational part of having a readable book. You read because you're like, ooh, what's going to happen? And that's basically inherently that's tension. You don't know where a situation might go. You usually have stakes, consequences that makes high quality tension. Conflict. Now, there are a lot of types of conflicts and tension. Sometimes it's just characters don't like each other, right? Oh, I don't like you. But I feel like really high quality tension is not about characters necessarily not liking each other as much as both of them want something that only one of them can have, or if one person has what they want, the other automatically doesn't get what they want. That's like high quality tension. So if we want to have a book that's compelling to read, we'll have to have a lot of these situations where our protagonist is faced with tension, consequences, stakes. Here's where failure comes in. Failure is when the objective is failed, I suppose, where the promise of tension is like, this is what could happen, boom, it's happening. The problem can be is the author then has to deliver on the consequences. If your hero fails a fight, he either needs to get beaten up or lose whatever he was fighting for. And that can sometimes put authors in a corner. Like, I can't have him lose to the 3 goblins in the tunnel because then he's dead. So, how do we find the kind of failure that is good for the story? And I feel like sometimes writers forget to fail. They kind of expect their character to come out on top every single time. And today, I hope we're going to discuss why we think that's probably a mistake and how failures can be done well. So, to start off, I've sent you some questions in advance, but let's go with the first one. Just in general, guys, where have you seen failure in television, books, comic books that you thought was well done?
Ooh, big question. Because I did sit down and think about it, and then I started taking notes, and I nearly filled a whole page, and I realized, well, that's clearly a good thing. Clearly, I've seen a lot of failure that I've loved, that have stayed with me. So I haven't had to deep dive and remember the plot. I almost, if it came to mind really quickly, the emotion that I had as a reader or a watcher came to me really quickly. It was like, oh, that was a powerful moment. That devastated me. So I can recall it quite quickly. I liked what you're saying, Matan, about creating tension through failure. And it as you were speaking, it actually clicked something for me about the try-fail cycle. I think we've mentioned that before, but the idea of you give your character an obstacle, and they would need to try and overcome it. And you do this several times, you stitch it all together, and there's your story. And I think something that's quite common to do is writers will give characters an obstacle. It's tough, and then they overcome it. They succeed at that cycle, and then they move on to the next one. It's tough, and then they overcome it. Actually forgetting to have them fail a couple of these. It's not enough to milk the tension of the drama of the moment, of the tricky obstacle. but the outcome, having a dynamic outcome, sometimes it succeeds, sometimes it fails. So I think you'll get to this, Matan, but I was splitting hairs between stories that end in failure, and I'm remembering the end beat of, oh, that's a tragic ending. This is literally the structure of a tragedy where the very final beat, the final thing isn't achieved. This story, is a tragedy. It's a failure in the outcome that the protagonist was after, as opposed to just a failure as a part of their journey. One of these midpoint, or anywhere really, one of the try-fail cycles that ends in a failure that's really important for the character on their way towards the end of their journey.
Absolutely. I wholly agree. And I was definitely going to bring up where is the failure positioned in the story and what effect does it have? I have a really stupid metaphor for that. A chocolate filling and a chocolate frosting leave a different, different impression, right? Is the chocolate on top or is it inside? Am I just overthinking chocolate?
That's perfect, actually.
Yeah, Ali, that was an excellent explanation. I really agree. Is there like an instant that you can bring up where you thought was well done?
Sure, great. All right, examples. So did you want me to go down the path of examples that are the ending tragedy, the chocolate on the outside, or do you want chocolate on the inside examples?
I would trust you with anything chocolate related in my life, so go ahead and choose.
That's lovely. All right, okay. I'll throw a couple out there. So some of the initial ones that came to mind were both Ned Stark and Robb Stark from Game of Thrones as endpoint failures. Those ring true for me as kind of their very final test they were confronted with. I probably will use a lot of D&D metaphors here, in that they either had a speech battle or a physical thing they had to do.
Rolled a 3.
They rolled the dice and they didn't roll well on their final test. So their final beats, they were failures, and there were big consequences because of their failures. For Ned, it was a trust test with Littlefinger, and there was a speech with Cersei as well that didn't go well. So kind of the mix of a Littlefinger conversation and a Cersei conversation. He's failed those tests, ended in failure. Robb Stark's is also quite beautiful because it's set in motion from he has a key decision about how he's going to handle his marriage pact and how he's going to handle the tensions in his camp. He makes two quote unquote wrong decisions that set him on a path he can't escape all the way to the Red Wedding. I guess I'll contrast this, still talking about Game of Thrones. It's an easy access point because there's so many characters. Daenerys and Jon Snow, for me, read as characters that have very good middle point failures. So these are tests that their characters need to go through to almost forge them into the characters they become to keep moving forwards. Daenerys is quite early. She makes the choice to trust this local witch while she's trying to save her sick husband.
Yeah.
She did not succeed. Her trust was not rewarded. She loses her husband. She loses her baby. And that's a massive failure for her. There are consequences. There are consequences. But it's definitely not the end point of her story. It's quite a forging, galvanizing moment for her as her story keeps going. And Jon Snow's the other character who that boy's got a lot of losses on his score sheet. He doesn't actually have a lot of W's. He's not a very good leader, in the sense that in the few positions where he needs to lead, men don't trust him. He doesn't have true authority. They do a lot of whinging and questioning of his authority. So he struggles there, and this often leads to death for the people he's leading. And even his first love, Ygritte, his failure to kind of handle the social dynamics and not have this situation flare into open battle. It does flare. He fails at this. He doesn't have the speech stats to prevent this from flaring into an open battle. It does. And the consequence is Ygritte dies. It's not the end of Jon's story, but it's a very important forging moment that is a John is no longer the same person after this moment in his arc.
And again, consequences. He lost his love interest. I think the worst than having no failures is having failures that feel hollow. Failures that don't really, like in a Pokemon game, when you lose, you just wake up in the Pokemon Center and you're fine. If it was more realistic, bye-bye Pikachu, right? But that's what I'm talking about. Thanks, Ali. I loved your examples. I've actually written some of them down myself, which is good. We're in the same vibe. Let's see if James has some different ones.
Actually, like
you wrote down
really,
Game of Thrones, didn't you?
I literally I love this subject. I love having characters, or I love seeing characters fail and like overcome the failure if the failure has like significant consequences. And then obviously when they have failures towards the end of their storyline or towards the end of their book, it just hits that much harder. Particularly in a horror, like it's a really good way of having the characters end up in kind of like their worst case scenario kind of thing. So it's kind of exactly what they were trying to avoid. That can be really, really impactful. If you want to have in my experience, if you want to have a reader put down the book and like not be able to stop thinking about it for days, it's like you have the characters fail really badly, like just right at the end. So when I got this question, I was going through like a bunch of different things and trying to come up with like which are like some of my favorite ones and what are not spoilers. But it's the same. I just kept coming back to Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones just has like so many good failures time and time again. So I think the one that I wanted to talk about was actually the Viper, the Prince Oberyn. Yeah. Which I think is really good. Has like two layers to it. The first one is kind of the easiest one to speak about because it's the one that was the same in the series, which in simply that like how he loses that battle or how he loses the fight is just done so well. It's foreshadowed really well in the TV series. They make him look cocky and they make him look overconfident as he's going in. It's a great fight, so well choreographed in TV show. He wins the fight, obviously, and then because of his own motivations and what he kind of has going on outside of the battle, he kind of gets too close. We all remember it. I don't need to retell it. I think everyone's probably seen it. Everyone probably discussed it in like these different essays and YouTube videos and all sorts of talking about it. So it's just a great failure in that it like feels so true to the character. It's a fantastic tragedy and it's really unexpected and impactful to the plot. But the other reason that I really, really liked it, and I don't quite think it was the same in the series, because I think they got great use out of that character for that season. Whereas my experience of reading the book was that he was introduced early on, either in that book or in the end of the previous book. And then he's sort of just in the background the whole time. And he never really felt like a major player or a major mover, even though he kind of held positions of prominence. He was involved in all the conversations. I was potentially a suspect for the murder that Tyrion was on trial for. But he never really felt like he was, you knew he was on the board, but he was never really in play. And then you have this chapter where he comes down and meets Tyrion right at Tyrion's trial has gone terribly. He's out of options. He has to face this trial by combat. No one will fight for him. And Oberyn comes into the cell and they have this conversation. And in that conversation, Oberyn tells his lore. He presents like the potential for a character arc. He introduced Dorne, this big thing. It's an incredible chapter, but he just walks out of that chapter with so much potential as a character. And then in the very next chapter, he's dead. So for me, that was just absolutely incredible writing on the behalf of George R. R. Martin to just set something up to be like, this, I could play this one out for 3 or 4 books easy, but I just wanted to hack it off right away.
Maximum devastation,
incredible, yeah. And then obviously very impactful for Tyrion the character, because now Tyrion's situation is done.
2 layers of stakes. Kind of, you're invested in this new character, but then it's also the consequences of the fight directly impact a crowd favorite, a POV character.
Exactly, yeah. And everything about you as a reader like sets you up to think, oh, this is how the main character is going to get away, and now we're introduced to this other interesting character who's also going to get away and become a main character. No, none of that happens. You expected far too much. So I think that was a great example. I kind of want to go against the grain here and say that
first of all, part of what makes A Song of Ice and Fire so fantastic is the author's willingness to let characters fail with all the consequences that come. If that means that, Robb Stark gets knifed in the stomach, then that's the consequences. But I kind of want to go and say, okay, but A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, has multiple protagonists. So they can kind of allow themselves, okay, this one can die and there's still a story to tell, which, by the way, maybe that's what's stopping books 6 and 7. Maybe too many protagonists were kind of lost. But let's talk about stories that have a single protagonist
Right.
and still dared to have them fail.
All right.
I've got one. I'm gonna go with one that I know is very well known is Harry Potter. In the fourth Harry Potter book, the stakes are as high as can be. Is Voldemort gonna come back or not? We're talking about the Goblet of Fire. Cedric's death, Harry clearly, for 3 years, it's basically been the same. Is Voldemort going to come back? First book, he stops him. Second book, he stops him. Third book, he doesn't really try to come back, but still there's something there.
His forces
and then
are
the fourth,
defeated.
yeah, exactly. If in the fourth book Harry succeeds again, I think the series loses something, because then it's the same plot 3 times. Voldemort tries to revive himself. One of his servants tries to, and Harry gets in the way. He stops him. And you kind of think, okay, maybe in book 6 or 7, she's going to let him come back. But no, in book 4, Voldemort succeeds. The book ends with the death of Cedric and the return of Voldemort. And that's it. They go home. And that's the frosting failure, I suppose, if we're going back to the chocolate stuff. So is Harry dead? No. Did he fail? Absolutely. So what do you guys think? Where do single protagonist stories
Yeah,
have
no,
done that well?
that's a great example, because that was used quite strategically as almost a genre shift for the Harry Potter series, where the first 3 are following a very clear pattern, just with the age group, in that we're middle grade books and we're defeating the bad guy at the end of each book. So the power of 4 and the power of that failure is to mark a very clear line in the sand. The genre's shifting now. The next run of books are going to happen almost in a completely different world, and it's a very good signaling device for that. All right, protagonists. I thought of The Wise Man's Fear, Patrick Rothfuss, the second book in his Name of the Wind series, currently a duology. So specifically this moment in A Wise Man's Fear, I remember it well because it was so perfectly frustrating. And so just to set up what happens, it's a good chunk of that book is the protagonist looking for a patron. It's been a very common thread through both books that he's always on the point of being so poor, like he'll have to live
2
on the streets.
He has 2 shirts.
Yeah, very little money, no clothes, no belongings, just always at the point of losing everything. So he's, for a good chunk of this book, he's wooing this patron, this incredibly rich patron. If he can seal the deal, he's going to be set for life, and it's going to solve a lot of his problems. There's a lot of mini try-fail cycles inside this wooing of the patron plot. Almost every conversation is a roll of the die to see if he passes the speech stat to impress this man. This man is giving him little tasks around his home. Can you go do this? And he's sitting back and he's like, yeah, okay. So there's a lot of investment in this ultimate goal of wooing the patron. We've been exposed to this protagonist for quite a while, Quoth, that we know what his moral lines are. For example, his background, I guess a real life equivalent is he's kind of like Romani heritage would be a real life equivalent. He's a traveler. He's grown up in caravans. So there's a lot of prejudice in his world that he's looked down upon. And these higher society people, they have like words like rabble, a derogatory insult. One of the worst words someone like him could be called because of his heritage. So we know that's one of his buttons. We've seen it pressed a couple of times across book 1 and then this one, that if someone uses this word, this is a character that'll throw out everything and start a fight. He will ruin high stake moments because someone's stepped on one of his buttons. We know this.
Many buttons.
It's been set up, this protagonist will do that. We've been then exposed to this patron's wife a few times. She's actually part of the plot of wooing the patron. There's a whole, can we get them to their marriage, get them married? We're really invested in now them as a couple are married. They sit down and it's pretty much at the sign the contract. He's going to secure this patron. And the wife tosses out this derogatory term. And it's not even directed at the protagonist. She's just talking about them as a people in general because he's been hiding his heritage. And it's just such a, for the reader, you've had an entire book and a half investment in this lead up that you know the button's been stepped on. You're just like, Christ, no. And it's a failure. The character sets his whole world on fire in those 10 seconds. Everything that's been built up to is thrown out the window because he has to be like, all right, hang on. What did you just say? and wants to start a fight. And it goes spectacularly wrong. And he loses the patron. And the consequences just are almost, they're immediate. There's a massive argument. The wife now won't speak to him, wants him thrown out of the house, thrown out of the city. And he's going to go back to being dirt poor again. And it's so well done as a reader that you see the train wreck coming and there's nothing you can do. So that's one of my favorite examples of just a protagonist failure. It's one of these inevitable failures. That's where I guess a well done failure is different to the dice roll, I suppose, metaphor I keep using. It's not like you just put your protagonist in a situation, do they win, do they lose? If you've properly threaded through the hints of do they have the tools, capacity, will they succeed or not? And if you can foreshadow that, then oh god, it hits.
I love that. I thought that was a great example, and I really want to touch on what Ali said about if your character is doing everything right and they just walk in the streets and 7 shadow demons jump out of nowhere and kick his ass. Is that a well-earned failure? Best case scenario, you've got a tragedy. Worst case, it just feels contrived and out of nowhere. And what Ali did really well, and she picked a failure that we could smell coming from miles. We could see how that is going to blow up gloriously. It's still a failure, still has consequences, but we are in on the joke. We know it's coming. We're thinking, is he going to overcome it? Maybe, please, maybe. But we kind of see why it would happen. Whereas if you just have a failure that is just everything is stacked against your hero almost unfairly, then you're just kind of torturing them. That's like the story of Job, if anyone's familiar. Like God and the devil made a deal.
Just a lot of bad things happening to them.
Yeah,
that they don't deserve.
So it's you don't want it to be like, excuse my language, you don't want it to be misery porn of just bad things happening one after the other without any foreshadowing. So it's actually not that easy to write compelling failures. And I think the best way to do it is find what's your hero's weakness, have him fail because of that weakness, not because he got unlucky, not because the boss came 2 chapters too early. Have it happen because of that weakness, and then when they overcome their weakness, if they overcome their weakness, it would feel well earned as well. Okay. Now I wanted to ask a very difficult question. I sent it to you guys in advance, but like, I want you to tell me about failure that you wrote. Now, if I recognize both of you have heaps of unpublished material, so we're going to try to do this either with things you've already published or with things you haven't published, but try not to spoil them if you can. I recognize that it's a really tough one. I don't mind starting if you want.
Do it.
Okay, I'll start. All right, obviously I'll go because we're plugging the hell out of this one. I'm going to start with the new mythic, my short story for the new mythic, Glyphlight, award nominated. Anyway, the story begins with a brother and a sister who go down the mines to look for their absent father. To put things short, they fail to find him. It's not like they find him and they can't save him. We get to the point in the story where they just have no idea what happened to him and they have to leave the mine because something uncomfortable happens there. And the point is that by having them fail their first objective, I tried to set up the story so we still have the mystery of what happened to the father, And then I try to establish the consequences, which are, okay, they're broke as hell, they have no money, the mother is sick, and there's also the guilt of the main characters who have decided to leave the father behind. Whether they finally succeed is something that you only discover towards the end of the story. So even though they failed the objective, it is not a complete failure. Okay, they don't find the father's corpse. Does that make sense? They fail for now, if that makes sense. The goal can still exist, but it does look pretty grim. So that's one option for failure. For example, Ash Ketchum, he loses the World Cup. He can try again.
He stuck around for quite a while to try again.
Yeah, Robb Stark cannot try again to defeat the Lannisters. It's done. It's a different kind of failure. That's my example.
Nice.
Yeah, I love writing failures. I love writing characters that like don't quite make it by the end of the story. I think the two things I most enjoy writing is when a character just comes so close to grasping something, like so close to figuring something out, and then something kind of pulls it away from them, and they never quite manage to get it, or they do figure it out, but now it's too late for them to do anything about it. Either because the moment has passed for them to take action, or because other things have come in that now you have the information. It's not of any use to you. I probably won't give any specific examples. But yeah, I do love writing. I love the structure of like the cautionary tale, I guess, where it's like this character didn't figure it out in time, and maybe if if any of the stuff is relative, you should try to figure it out a little bit quicker.
If grandma has weird ears, maybe rethink your visit.
Oh, it was funny when you said published works. I didn't even consider thinking of Unsound. I just thought of my two books straight away. But Unsound does have a moment that I think came together well in the end. It's kind of the combination of two threads in that the protagonist has it's his father's guitar. He's returned home. He wants to kind of oil it up and restring it and look after it. And this is a father that like left the family, abandoned the family. So when the mother sees him with the guitar, she's like, "What are you doing with that thing?" And he's like, "Look, I want to keep it. I want to play it." And it causes a rift between them. That he wants to keep the guitar around the house and have it, and it bothers her to see him with it. But it's more important to him in that moment. Then there's this other thread that he's trying to prove to his kind of mentor / employer that he can be reliable. Please use me for gigs. You can trust me. He's on a path to prove that to this person. And three threads actually. And then there's the love story thread. And our main character Noah, I'm trying to remember what actually happens. As a result of the romance thread, that there's a rift, there's an argument between them. It's about the guitar, and he promised to be there for a gig. And is that more important to you than me? And because he's getting that question both from now the love story and the mum, now he's just like, fine, look, I'll just get rid of it. So he's kind of pushed to this point. The director did a great job of this hard cut choice of Noah just throws the guitar in the water. And I do love the hard cut because at least twice when I've seen that movie with an audience, people go when he throws the guitar away. So I guess there's been a successful build-up of attachment to the guitar, and then under the pressures he's under from the romance thread and the mother thread, that he's like, fine, I'll just get rid of it, throws it in the water, and people are like, threw it in the water. Immediate consequences though, he's promised to do a gig for the mentor character. It's followed immediately by the sheepish scene of she's like, "You did what to your guitar?" Look, and he's like, "I could just borrow another one. I can still do the gig." And she's like, "No, that was kind of the final straw. If you're the kind of person that throws guitars in the river, like, I don't think we could work together." And then she like gets someone else in, and they go do the gig, and he's just left. He's literally thrown out his guitar. He's managed to fuck up all three threads in his life: the mother, the love story, and his professional music career. So we are approaching. It's not quite the lowest of the low, but it's a really big failure point in the movie as it moves on.
Yeah.
That he threw his guitar in the river. So that's Unsound. And then the ones I actually thought about when you asked was I thought I would share my struggle with this one. So say Majesty. Obviously, this is a work in progress manuscript. But thinking back on it, like this is a main character I've designed to eat a lot of shit kind of all the way through. And that's quite intentional. That it's a character who's set up as they're meant to be quite skilled and proficient, and this is the first time in their life they undertake the series of events they now go through. There's a lot of failures in a row, and it's meant to be quite humbling and quite trying, and it's meant to take this character to quite a low point. There's not going to be a lot of wins here. I don't think I've quite got that pacing right yet. I think it's why I've been working on the manuscript for quite a while, because turns out that's not really satisfying for a reader to read. They're like, is this character going to get any W's? And I'm like,
Eventually.
eventually. So I think that's the trick for me as a writer, to get that balance right. That I think the spirit is correct. I think the intention's correct. That I want this character to go on a series of losses. But I've just got to pull it off in a way that the reader, this is satisfying, and not just, what the fuck am I reading? This character sucks. So I don't have any answers for you yet. I just wanted to share that I am midway through struggling with that, and I think if I can pull off the pacing, that'll be great. And then obviously there's William from the Cypress novels, who has a very excellent relationship with failure. I think I'm striking a better balance there. I'm going to speak specifically on Will's speech stat again. Towards the end of the first manuscript, he comes off the back of winning an important speech battle, where because he's talked his way out of this situation, them and the ship, they get to leave this port, and it's kind of a high note, and he's thinking very highly of his skill set off the back of that win. He then immediately has 2 speech battles that he loses in a row, and it's my intention that he's not aware that he's lost them. As an audience, if you're aware that he has one conversation that he loses, and then he has another conversation that he loses, and if he just kind of comes off the end being like, oh, those were 2 weird conversations. But if as an audience you can pick up, oh, because of that and that there's going to be consequences. And yeah, basically the next day things go very, very, very poorly for him. Because he's had these 2 conversations he has not handled correctly in a row. And the consequences, to the point where, and I wanted to talk about this briefly, but he can't get out of that situation on his own. It's a situation he needs to be rescued from. And I was kind of asking myself, that's an interesting measure of a failure. Is it a failure that's so bad, supporting cast, other characters, other people need to come in and help this person back from their failure, as opposed to something that even if they fail, they can still, walk it off, shake it off. It's because you mentioned in your show notes, Matan, Frodo, when he needs to be rescued from the spiral battle. Yeah, Shelob. That's like Sam's moment. Sam has to come in and rescue him. So that's a failure so bad. Frodo wasn't going to get himself out of that situation. He needed
massive
help.
L.
Yeah. So I thought that was just an interesting measuring tool as well.
Absolutely.
When you're thinking about how bad is this failure.
I think we're walking on thin ice, because one of the things that make characters likable is competence. There's a reason Sherlock Holmes, House, Batman, there's a reason they're so popular. We like characters that feel like they know what they're doing. So we are kind of walking a balance here. What we also like is character growth. So maybe if we have most of our failures early on, if we feel like it's getting better, we'll be invested in the character. So then that raises the question, what happens if we intersperse our failures, like in real life, in a balanced way? Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. I think it depends. I think from a narrative standpoint, it's easier to get behind the low to high or high to low, where we start off and tear it down, or we start from the bottom and then now we're here. That's something to consider when we write our failures. But I also liked how you touched about, and the supporting cast, how it's kind of almost a trope to just have the supporting cast wait on the sidelines until it's time to pick up the hero. You can do it, Goku. Just train for 10 more years in the hyperbolic time chamber. But I think that if it feels like the cast is genuinely interwoven into the conflict, it would feel fair. For example, I'm going to bring up The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. You have a wide cast. You have the protagonist, Kelsier and Vin. But when other characters help, it doesn't feel like we were cheated out of a one-on-one with the Lord Ruler. No, it's their job to help. This is a team mission. So sometimes maybe in a shonen anime, when a hero has fought all these battles one by one, and we kind of want to see, oh, can he take the final boss? And then someone kind of comes and helps. We're like, no, I wanted to see if he can do it by himself. That's all things to consider. Try to avoid. I think we're kind of steering away from failure, but try to avoiding failure by just inserting a third character into a conflict, because that can also feel a bit like a Deus ex machina. Yeah. So the conclusion is that there isn't an answer. Find the failure pattern that works for you. I do think it's easier to pull off consistent patterns, a rising or falling pattern of a lot of failure, less failure, or less failure, a lot of failure. That's what I think.
Something I found really effective in the Tree Body Problem series, because you can kind of look at that. Well, it's like there's failures and there's wins. If you take like humankind as the main character, they have failures and they have wins, but in between each of those, there's arguments and obstacles over like what the next plan should be or what the next approach should be. So what you end up having is you have kind of individual character or faction wins in terms of getting their strategy. Oh, we've argued for this strategy to win, or we've developed this new theory or this new technology or this new approach. So you do have wins. Oh, it failed because you failed to predict the nature of the problem. And then you've got a series of wins, and then a win because that worked. So that ends up creating win states that are building towards a big lose, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Little wins that build towards a lose.
Wait, James.
Then little wins that build towards a big win. So yeah, that can be.
Does the book end with a big lose?
Read it. You'll have to check it out, or watch the series.
I'm not waiting for season 2. I'm gonna read the books.
Dude,
guys,
the Dark Forest is the best in the series, but also the third one is also fantastic. So I thoroughly recommend reading the books. They're fantastic.
I will after I finish the
just because it's fresh on my mind. Fallout did something clever with its 3 protagonists that are representing 3 different factions of this world. And it was very clear in the pilot that these they had name title cards. So you're like, cool, these are going to be 3 threads. It's just no doubt about it that you are following these 3 people. And it was very clear with their goals. This person wants this person wants this person wants this. And they're all intertwining. They intertwine quite quickly. Quicker than I expected. Some shows I've seen kind of milk the moment when you're going to bring them all together. This show was quite quick to bring them together. But because of that, one of these protagonists is going to win this encounter. One of them is going to lose. So technically, you've got characters going on quite sophisticated arcs, because sometimes they're winning, sometimes they're losing. There's dynamic there. They're developing as they go. But as an audience, it's avoiding that dissatisfaction I mentioned that Majesty's having, where there's just a lot of losses in a row. Because even though this protagonist is eating shit for a while, it means this other character we like is winning.
Yeah.
So it manages to avoid that problem of the person you're investing in and is just having a bad time, and they're not very skilled. Like what they do with Maximus is very clever. Like, that guy is an absolute idiot. He's useless. If he was game stats, he's intelligence 1. But and because of this, he makes a lot of bad decisions and eats a lot of shit. But it's to the benefit of the other characters you like, the other protagonists you're following. So it somehow it works, and you're still invested in his journey. So I thought that was just a very clever way of getting around that particular pacing and investment issue.
By the way, that does come at the cost of having an antagonist, because that show does not really have a long-running antagonist. It kind of shows up towards the end. But by deciding, okay, the stage belongs to 3 conflicting protagonists, you're kind of saying, okay, the antagonist is, I guess, the settings.
Yeah, in saying that, though, what it can do quite elegantly is it's capitalism, right? Is the true antagonist that's causing all these
Yeah.
conflicting factions, and
Yeah.
it can be really heavy-handed but
A little.
skilled with that message, where I feel like other shows would have to play around it. Who's the enemy? Fallout could just be like, it's really obvious
Everyone.
that the enemy's capitalism. Let's just
Oh, yeah.
follow out the consequences of this.
This
Watch
reminds me
Fallout.
an
It's
awful
great.
lot of. Does anyone remember that film Rat Race, where the characters have to
yeah.
travel across
I
a
haven't
state or
watched
across
it.
America, chasing like 10 million or something? Oh,
Yeah.
so silly. But
But
the
good.
premise is essentially, it's great. Like, it's what a great cast at the time. Matan, the premise is essentially, I think like a dozen characters are called up into a hotel room in Vegas, and someone tells them there's 10 million or there's 50 million in a suitcase. First one to get to where the suitcase is gets it, and the characters start racing off trying to get to it. But obviously, in that story, anytime one of them has a success, it comes at the cost of at least one other character.
Absolutely,
So, because every scene
Nice.
feels very dynamic because of that.
That's worth mentioning, though. We've talked about a lot of spec fic genres. We've talked about a lot of dramas and how this works, but sitcoms as the art of the try-fail cycle and the
Yes.
failure and
Yeah.
milking that. It's a very, you need to hit those failure beats for your story to move forward in a sitcom, because it is these characters at their low moments, how they react at their low moments is almost what the joy of the sitcom is. I'm thinking of like
Absolutely.
Frasier, even Friends, but they have a goal and they absolutely struggle and buffoon their way towards their goal, and that's why we watch those genres.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
If anyone watched Peep Show or Fleabag or any of those, like I'd never thought of sitcoms in terms of failure, but yeah, that those immediately come to mind. Every scene is the main character just hanking at life. Like,
Guys,
it's brilliant.
I feel like we can talk about this for like 3 hours. We do have a game to play, so I would love.
Let's get on with the game.
Yeah. Any final comments about failure before we jump into the game? Something, because you guys spit a lot of truth.
Yeah, no, I could talk about this all day. I actually had, look, my Spitfire ones was Adolin killing Sadius, which I equated with Superman killing Zod in Man of Steel. I know, two very different ones.
He had it coming. He had it coming.
But I love that as an emotional failure. Technically, they've won this physical battle at the cost of their morals, and it's a failure for them. I just want another contrast of what that failure can look like at the climax of a story.
There is going to be some Sanderson in the game, just in case you were worried.
Bring it on.
All right, let's play the game.
I just want to get two quick mentions. Sorry, to cut you off. In Red Dragon, it's the first Hannibal Lecter novel. The character is kind of called out of retirement from his cozy life with his girlfriend and his girlfriend's son to help hunt a serial killer. And he doesn't want to do it, but he essentially does it because he knows he can help. And so once he knows he can help, he kind of is compelled to come in and help. And, it's a whole story chasing a serial killer. He gets a little bit too close, has to tell the family to go and stay somewhere safe kind of deal. And then the film ends one way, and I think the book ends almost the exact same way, which, everything's wrapped up in the end. But gradually over the course of the story, the relationship gets kind of under strain. And you kind of just feel as you're reading it, you're just going to heap things on to the main character for them to have a shit time and to give them kind of compelling reasons to back out of the story. But by the end of the story, he's lost the girlfriend and the girlfriend's son, and they've kind of gone back to their lives. And it just felt like such a tragic failure at the end of the story, because the character had won the overall hero's arc, and he saved the day and everyone got to go home and be safe, but he didn't have the happy home to go home to at the end. And that was a fantastic kind of emotional failure that kind of came from the very beginning of the story, because once he decided to go on his journey, there was kind of no way for him to balance both of these worlds. So I thought that was fantastic.
Also, The Godfather 2 ends similarly. He wins the mafia war, but he loses his family. So that's a similar. All right, let me explain the rules. We are going to play a game of fails, and here's how we're going to play. I'm going to share my screen, and you guys are going to understand quite quickly what we're doing. We have 12 distinct failures for our team of Ali and James to rank. But of course, there are rules. You are going to rank them one at a time, so you do not know what is the failure you're going to rank. You have to explain why you're going to rank it. Each one of you is allowed only one S tier ranking.
Only one S.
And
okay.
halfway through the game, I will let you each overwrite one of the other's ranking. So if James gave something an A and Ali's like, that's an F, Ali can move it. How do we do this weird and very arbitrary ranking? How much did this failure contribute to the story? Did it make the story better? Is it essential to the story? If it's essential, is it well done? A failure can be essential and still be crappily executed.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, a failure can be superfluous but very well executed. You guys are the judges. You decide. I'm just going to say the failures one by one, and I'm going to try not to let you see the photos because then you'd know what failure I'm talking about. But all right,
so excited.
Who wants to start? Are the rules clear,
yes,
competitors?
I think so. Yeah.
I think so. I think I'll figure it out as we go.
I'm scared about the idea of only one S, but I don't know them all in one go before ranking my S. I just have to go with my gut.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry, just the ranking system is S is the worst.
Oh, S
and
is
then
the best.
as you go down,
No, F is
S
the worst.
is the best.
S is superb.
Got it.
It's
Okay.
above A.
Okay,
All
sorry,
right,
the color system threw me. Okay.
We'll
I get it
start
now.
with Ali.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, you are allowed to say, I don't know this one, but if I've been a good host, I've picked ones that you do know.
Okay.
Let's see.
Right.
Ali, how would you rank Rocky Balboa's failure to defeat Apollo Creed in the first Rocky movie?
It's so crucial. It's the inciting incident. The whole story generates from this moment, and it is well done. So ticking all those boxes, it's as an A rank failure for me, I think. I'm going to put it in A.
All right, we got an A rank failure. Ali picked an A for Rocky fails to defeat Apollo Creed. All right, James, are you ready?
Yes.
How would you rank Frodo's failure to throw the ring in Mount Doom at the end of the third book?
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Because I think that's a fantastic failure. Oh, that would have been a really bad failure if Gollum hadn't been there to mess it up.
The consequences.
Ended up
But think about
throwing
that.
it into him himself.
Are the consequences capitalized on? But you can still say it's amazing.
Personally, thematically, I think the consequences are essential. That's a tricky one. But then,
explain the thematic consequences.
For me, I felt like the theme was essentially that kind of evil will defeat itself by like the lusting for power. So it wasn't so much that the heroes defeated evil, because that's a little bit, I guess it kind of is a little bit cliched. It was that the squabbling over the power ended up defeating the evil itself. And that was how, everything that everyone was fighting for the ring. And that was a thing that defeated the power of the ring, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
that was what I took from it.
The evil defeated itself.
Yes. So for me, I'd probably put it up there at an A. I'm only not giving it an S simply because I know Gollum was there because it didn't have massive plot consequences because it was resolved pretty quickly. But then thematically, it's essential. So I'll give it an A.
Okay, we're going to Ali.
Okay, I'm looking at the ceiling, so I'm trying really hard not to look at your spoiler images.
I appreciate it. All right, Ali, how would you rate Naruto's failure to retrieve Sasuke at the first at the first time, like when Sasuke runs away?
Okay, so the retrieve Sasuke arc, kind of the end. They've defeated the four from the village sound and still can't get Sasuke back. That's the moment you're talking about?
Yeah.
It's like fucking genre defining. Sorry.
Are we just gonna have a bunch of A's? I think
we're just like, well done.
You've given two good examples.
So the reason I called it genre defining, so it showed an anime we're so used to, like if it was Goku trying to get Vegeta back, Goku would succeed.
Or he would break his. Never mind. Go ahead.
Yeah. But we're so used to the shonen anime protagonist and friendship winning, and this is a moment where friendship doesn't win. It doesn't conquer this moment. And Naruto.
All right, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interject. I'm going to do something unfair. I'm going to change the rules right now. You're allowed 2 A's. You're allowed 1 S, 2 A's, and as many B's
Okay.
as you want.
Oh, well, I'm
Okay.
already regretting putting Rocky at A because now I'd put this at A. It's fine.
Okay, but you are allowed, and I'm extending the shuffle, the midway shuffle. You can change one of your own instead of one of your opponents. All right?
Okay.
Okay. So after
I'm
your
gonna
third choice,
I'm gonna
you'll be allowed
Tetris
to
this.
shuffle.
I'm gonna abuse the rules. Watch me. Okay. All right.
Okay. Yeah.
I feel like the pressure has just mounted so
It
much more.
has.
I should have done this at the beginning. 2 A's,
right,
1
okay.
S, as many B's as you want.
So I'm comparing Rocky and I'm comparing Naruto because off the back of this failure, it's like a midpoint failure because we get all of Naruto Shippuden happens because of this failure to get Sasuke back. And Naruto is fundamentally changed as a person because of this moment. Let's put it in the ace. I'm trying to think of how it could be improved.
Okay. All right.
Can it be
Let's
improved?
get to the
Could they be
We'll
gayer?
get to the shuffle
Would
phase.
that improve it? Not I
Execution.
don't know.
How's the execution? The execution was good. I cried.
The execution was fantastic.
I wept.
Now put it in A. You can't stop me. It's in
Put
A.
it in A.
Okay.
All right. Okay. James.
Okay.
James, this is the first one where I have no idea if you watched it. I'm
Okay.
taking a risk here. Should I take the easy one? Yeah, I'll take the easy one. I'll give the weird one to Ali because I think she watches a few more movies. James, how would you rank Robb Stark's failure to win the war against the Lannisters?
Okay. Trying to remember what happens right after he exits the storyline. Yeah, I think it was usually wasn't it? Brilliantly executed.
Mm-hmm.
There's a pun here, but okay.
Executed.
Oh yeah.
I apologize.
Took us a minute.
Yes, of course. I mean, I'll call it a murder, but
that's just Stark propaganda. But go
Spoken
on.
like a Bolton. Yeah.
The fair fight. Anyway.
Yeah, and then the end of the war. God, I'm trying to remember what happened next in the story because I think there was just peace.
Whoa.
The land.
Think about it for a second. Were the Lannisters right? Okay.
Yeah, well, I guess they won, so
yeah,
that kind of ended things, didn't it? But that was obviously a big consequence because then it started different kind of. Oh, it's so tricky. I'm gonna give it a B.
2 A's. You give it a B? Okay, we got the first B.
Give it a B. Yeah.
All right. Ali, please tell me you've watched the movie Don't Look Up.
Oh. I'm not certain.
James, have
Leonardo
you watched it?
DiCaprio's. I've seen it, yeah.
Okay, maybe save it for James.
I knew I should have given it to you. All right. James, guess what? You're doing 2 in a row. How would you rank? How would you rank Don't Look Up's failure to save the planet from an asteroid? So, just to give the premise, scientists see an asteroid coming to Earth.
Oh, I have seen this. I have, yes. Yeah, the comedy.
Ali, can I give it to you then?
Yeah. No, if it solves your problem. Yes, I have seen it. Yep.
Ali, what do you think? At the end, they just die.
Yeah, no, I do remember the dinner scene right at the end where they're all sitting around just trying to act normal while they're sweating buckets. It's good. Okay, so they're the scientists' failure, humanity's failure to come together and unite.
Everyone's failure.
Yeah. Because it is a critique of human nature, I guess. So thematically, look, I get the thematics. Like that had to be the ending for the message to land.
Yeah.
I would say executed well solely. Like that final scene is executed well. The movie as a whole isn't the greatest movie ever, but thematically and that scene hand in hand are doing a very good job. Look, I'm going to put it as a C. I'm not going to I'm being a bit harsh on it, but maybe because it took me a moment to even remember the movie altogether. But look, I remember the final scene. Good themes, but I guess overall execution is what it's being punished for.
Okay, good. We are 1 step away from the mid-game shuffle. So after this round, you will be allowed to move 1. I'm reminding you, you're not allowed to switch 2. You're just moving 1 to a different tier if you want, or you can save that shuffle for the end if you don't want to use it. Actually, no. Actually, yes. We'll think about it. I'm a
Oh
dictator.
god, these rules are moving
Alright.
pieces.
Yeah, that's what happens when I come up with a game in the shower. Okay, James, are you ready? How would you
Yes.
rank? Have you watched Braveheart? Freedom.
I haven't, but I'm familiar with the
You know
broad
what
strokes.
happened?
Yeah.
How would you
I know the
rank?
news.
Okay, let's say that it's not from Braveheart; it's from history. Okay, we're ranking real history. How would you rank the real life historical William Wallace's failure to live? He was quartered and killed.
Yeah, pretty
If life's
consequential for himself. Obviously.
I feel like this is upsetting to any Scottish people that might listen. James is Irish,
I
by
mean,
the
I'm
way,
sure
so
they
that
would
adds
agree.
more layers to this.
Yeah. I guess if the Scottish had, if they'd held off the English, then the Irish could have held off the English.
Ooh.
I'm going to confidently give that an S, and no one's going to dispute me on that for political reasons.
Whoa. Whoa.
You made it about real
unexpected
life,
S.
and then okay.
All right, we got 6.
No one wants to
Anyone
defend
wants
colonialism, so
anyone wants to shuffle? Anyone wants to change their A's? Maybe?
Yeah, no, okay, move Rocky. Oh, but you said I'm still gonna want to put something in it. Okay, move Rocky to B for me, so I can sleep at
Okay,
night.
you each got an A spot, and James does not have an S spot, which is unexpected. But let's go, William Wallace. Watch the movie.
I might bump Frodo down to a B. Yeah.
To a B.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you guys don't know what's waiting for you. Maybe the best is already behind us, as far as you know.
I know, this is terrifying.
All right.
This could be a massive failure, and that we'll have to end on a tragic note.
Let's do a fun one. Ali, how would you rank any of Ash Ketchum's World Cup failures? Let's bundle them. His failure to become Pokemon Master. How integral to the show is that?
Oh, I mean, integral to the show because they wanted to keep they couldn't finish his story. Yeah, no, they had to exploit his failure to keep the story engine going, which means your story engine's not working,
Great.
is it?
Yeah.
It's lazy. So
lazy.
F.
Finally we got an F, thank God. All right. Following that.
And he used the shit version of Ash Ketchum as well.
Of course I did. What do you mean? It's a frosting failure. James, how would you rank? Let's give you the other Game of Thrones. Ned Stark parting with his head.
Oh man.
End of season 1.
Yeah. Well, that's an incredible one, obviously, because nobody was seeing that one coming. And then it sets the entire story in motion. That's got to be an A. That's a comfortable A. Right. I mean, I'd give it an S, but I've used my S. So.
All right, I think this will be a fun one for Ali. Ali, how would you rank Han Solo's failure to calm his son down on that bridge?
I mean, pretty devastating for him. Pretty devastating for Leia. And pretty devastating for Kylo. Maybe if he had a better father figure in his life, Kylo could have, stayed off the path he went down. I think I'm giving Kylo more weight than he deserves, but okay. Is it integral to the story?
I mean, if they just don't meet, you can still tell the same story, can't you?
You can. Kylo, it's a story
Han Solo was busy. He's busy. He's fighting something somewhere.
The story's messy enough. Like, when you can kind of see the stitching on a story that the writers would have forced this character on this path, regardless of kind of what elements you threw at them. I am getting the sense that this could have been interchangeable with something else, and the same story could have unfolded. So I'm not a massive, I like it. But it wasn't super well done. So Han Solo failing a speech battle, I'm going to put D. I'm going to be rough on it. I'm going to give it a D.
All right. Okay. James, you know Batman, right?
I'm familiar with. I know Batman. Yeah,
Have you watched
I've heard of Batman.
the Dark Knight? Have you watched the Dark Knight?
I have. Yeah.
Do you know that scene where the Batman grabs Joker, like, where is she? And he gives him 2 locations, and like one of them is
Yeah,
Harvey
yes.
Dent,
Yes.
and one of them is Rachel Dawes.
Yes. Yes.
And he obviously want to go for Rachel, but he fails.
Yes, but he's given the Joker dupes him. Yeah.
How would you rank the failure of Batman to save his loved one?
Pretty emotionally hard hitting. I don't know if it necessarily changed his character arc, but it was even more impactful for Harvey Dent, which sent him down a certain road, and then Batman had to go down a certain road along with that.
If before you rank, can I ask you if it matters that this is a different actress than the one we got attached to in the first movie? If we're talking execution, you killed off a character.
Yeah.
I didn't think so. I thought the films came out far enough apart, and I thought that the character moments are strong enough in that film that you were attached enough to her.
Yeah.
So I thought that worked okay.
All right.
I thought that was a pretty good execution. I know we're near the end of the game.
You do have an A, but you have
Do
another
have an
round
A.
after that.
Might save my A just in case the last one is a big one, or the last one could be crap. I don't know what's a strong finisher.
No more shuffling.
I give it a B.
Give it a B. All right. And I even
Yeah.
chose the photo of him getting the letter from Alfred. Or not getting the letter, right? He's not getting the letter.
No,
All right.
what was the letter? Because didn't Alfred burn it?
He's basically, I don't love you. I love Harvey now. Good luck.
That's
No,
fine.
yeah,
Yeah.
Alfred burned that. I think he's just looking at his mask in this one.
Yeah. And then he's like telling Alfred,
Yeah.
she was going to leave him for me. And Alfred's like, yeah, she was.
It's just the
Yeah.
Wolverine meme where he's touching a picture frame. That's what I'm gonna
Wolverine,
imagine
right?
is happening. Yeah.
That's nice. Okay, Ellie.
All right.
Of
What have you
course,
got?
I saved the Sanderson especially for you.
Okay.
How would you rank Kelsier's defeat at the hands of the Lord Ruler in the book The Final Empire?
Oh, it's so funny because this moment is the retroactive context this moment gets because of all the additional cosmere stuff. Like for so long, this was just a trilogy, and this was a massive moment in the trilogy where it was just a shock that the quotation marks
Okay, but
protagonist was killed. So
Yep.
to kill a protagonist, it's massive. It's defining for Vin because now in every sense she has to step up as the series protagonist, but then she also has to lead the crew, and she has to go on to, like, in that book she does defeat the big bad, but there's continuing ongoing consequences that aren't even solved by cutting the head off the snake, that she has to lead the way through this. So that's huge for her, this moment. Essential to the story. And Kelsier does a good job of setting himself up as the spiritual martyr figure. He's like, you're
Yeah.
going to rally the lower class. I'm going to make myself a bit of a symbol, and then I'll go and get myself killed. And that'll super help you out. Trust me. Trust me, this is the way to go. And then the bastard gets to be correct. It's an interesting martyr story. Was it super well executed? Again, I can't shake the additional context I have of spoilers that now he's not actually dead. He's still around being a dickhead in the universe.
I think to be fair, we should look at it at the prism of that story.
That
Because
singular story, yeah.
Otherwise, I will never watch Star Wars again, like any of them.
If you
with
let
that
the others
attitude.
inform the others.
Yeah.
Oh, Sanderson's got a lot of very cool failures, and I don't think this is his most well executed one. Nor is it truly a failure, because the consequences, there's actually a lot of positive consequences of killing Kelsier here. So if that's how I'm measuring it, it's kind of around C for me. I'm kind of putting it on the don't look up, in that it's thematically sound. That's what had to happen. Yeah. I remember it being a massive shock when I read it. I'm like, holy fucking shit. But as a devastating moment, yeah. Anyway, I'm satisfied with my C. I think it's a C.
All right. So at the moment, Ali has no S.
I couldn't
She's
commit.
got one A, which she has given to Naruto, and she's got a C, D, and F, and one B awarded to Rocky Balboa.
I did well at trying to spill them all out. Yeah.
No, you
Yeah,
did.
it's a good spread.
Whenever
It's a
I
good
do a
spread.
game like this next time, I'm going to be an asshole and just say one per tier and see what happens. The Hunger Games version of this game. All right, James, finish us off with Infinity Wars. Avengers fail to stop Thanos.
Okay.
You've watched it, right?
I've seen it. Yeah.
Oh, okay, thanks.
So
Very good.
that's incredibly well executed. I don't want to go. I'm gonna put that in S
You can't.
because that's. I can't. I think I could fit it in.
You can use my
I think I
S
could
slot.
fit it in alongside.
Wow,
every other world,
guys, James just passed the charisma check live in front of you. I'm putting it on the S. That was well executed.
Yeah, that was obviously, I think 10 years of a setup for a failure. They never failed before. They always won at the end. So
Yeah.
that worked really well. Yeah, absolutely incredible.
All right.
I remember
well done.
the credits rolling afterwards, and the credits were disappearing in dust, and I was like, "God, this is harrowing."
Yeah, it kind of sucked that we knew that all these actors had contracts for the next movie, so we couldn't even fool ourselves that they're not coming back. Like it was, but still.
But there was a moment of how are they going to do it though? It was
Yeah, it was more of a
for
how
about
they're going to
10 minutes. I was like, I didn't really cop that, and then everyone I went to the film that was like, they'll just go back in time or something, and I was kind of like, oh, okay, I guess, yeah.
All right, Marvel. Nice. Okay. But it was well, like I remember a similar thing. I'm like, how can they possibly do another movie? The impact of it was fantastic. Well executed.
Yeah.
Guys, I'm so proud of you. I believe you have been honest and genuine judges of failures, and I really enjoyed hosting this podcast. You guys had so much to say. I kind of feel like we could have done a 3-hour podcast on failures.
Easily, we could have kept,
just us
there
discussing.
There is more to say. There is more to say. I just want to rehash my final point is that the lifeblood of a readable book is tension and conflict. And in order to round up your tension, you need to have the threat of failure be a credible threat. Depending on your genre, maybe more so than other genres, but you still need to have the possibility of a failed objective for me to care about a success at achieving an objective. Thank you so much, James and Ali. You have been fantastic. Any last words to our listeners?
No, just thank you for hosting, Matan, and I don't think this podcast has been a failure.
Oh,
yeah, it was a great one.
Just to remind our loyal listeners, we have some exciting stuff out and about at the moment. We still have the new Mythic. It has not been kicked off Amazon. It's still available if you want to buy it on paperback or as an ebook. And of course, we have the super exciting audiobook out with some really, really terrific and deep cast of voice actors. Seriously, if you asked me 2 years ago, I could not have imagined we'd get such talented people to work with us. Have a look at that. And more to come in the future. Thank you again. I was Matan, James and Ali. Have a beautiful day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I love our buys that get faded out over the music.
You're listening to Pros and Cons, the Precipice Fiction podcast.